If someone told you that the key to eternal freedom lay hidden in a course that costs several $1,000s, you might raise an eyebrow. If they added that this course could rid your soul of alien parasites from a galactic war fought 75 million years ago, you might raise both. And yet this, astonishingly, is not an obscure corner of the internet or a science fiction convention. It's a registered religion with tax exemption. Scientology begins not in a temple, but on a typewriter. Its prophet wasn't a mystic or monk. He was a pulp fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard, who understood better than most that the human mind loves stories, especially ones that make the listener feel powerful. He once remarked, perhaps only half-jokingly, that the easiest way to make $1 million was to start a religion. He wasn't wrong. What he created was not merely a belief system, but a psychological architecture, equal parts hypnosis, hierarchy, and hope. It promised spiritual liberation, but delivered it through paywalls. Salvation, apparently, was now a subscription model. But here's the brilliance of it. Scientology didn't sell belief. It sold progress. Traditional religions promised heaven after death. Hubbard promised godhood while alive, measurable advancement, charts, levels, certificates. It was religion redesigned for the modern consumer, for those who needed their enlightenment quantified. And it spoke the language of an era obsessed with self-improvement and pseudoscience. No ancient scrolls, no dusty parables, just auditing sessions, engrams, and thetans. It gave people the illusion of scientific legitimacy while operating on the same ancient formula. Human insecurity, repackaged as spiritual necessity. The auditing process, where one holds two metal cans connected to a crude lie detector called an e-meter, is presented as a technological exorcism. You're told it measures your mental mass or spiritual charge. In truth, it measures only your skin's electrical resistance, roughly the same principle as a mood ring. But the brilliance lies not in the device itself. It lies in the ritual. Rituals don't need to work. They need only to feel like they do. The language of Scientology is engineered to colonize the mind. Terms like clear, operating thetan, and suppressive person create an entirely new reality, one where every thought is filtered through the organization's vocabulary. Once you speak the language, you think in it. That's the real conversion. Traditional religions at least had the poetry of metaphor: Eden, Nirvana, the Tao. Scientology replaced poetry with paperwork. You don't confess your sins, you file them. You don't pray, you process. The divine has been bureaucratized. Yet beneath its glossy promises of mental freedom lies a system built on control, of thought, of emotion, of information. The irony is almost tragic. A religion claiming to free the mind becomes a prison for it. Members are encouraged to disconnect from critics, including family. The church calls it protection of spiritual integrity. Psychology might call it isolation. And the deeper one goes, the higher the cost, financially and psychologically. Each level of enlightenment requires new materials, new courses, new payments. Ascension through the spiritual hierarchy is not earned through virtue or understanding, but through invoices. The holy ladder is built of receipts. When followers finally reach the highest level, operating thetan level 3, they learn what was hidden all along, that all human suffering comes from the trauma of disembodied alien souls, called thetans, trapped on Earth after a cosmic genocide orchestrated by a galactic tyrant named Xenu. The story sounds like satire, but within the system, it's revelation. The absurdity becomes sacred once you've paid enough to believe it, yet to mock the believers outright would be too easy and perhaps unfair. People don't join religions because they love nonsense. They join because they crave meaning. In a world where the self feels fragmented, invisible, powerless, Scientology offers structure, vocabulary, certainty. It offers the intoxicating idea that you are not broken, only misunderstood by the universe. And so, intelligent, capable individuals, actors, writers, scientists, fall not because they are fools, but because they are human. To belong to something that promises omnipotence is to be briefly relieved from the terror of insignificance. The church understands this better than any psychologist could. It exploits the need for coherence, the yearning for a narrative that explains everything, even pain. The auditing sessions become confessionals without God, where trauma is data and guilt becomes a file number. But while confession in traditional religion ends with forgiveness, Scientology ends with a bill. What's remarkable is how it mimics the form of science without its substance. It borrows the aesthetic of reason, charts, diagrams, graphs, yet its foundation rests on unverifiable claims. It preaches freedom from mental implants, while implanting its own worldview so deeply that doubt itself becomes a sin. Questioning the doctrine isn't curiosity, it's heresy, labeled en theta, a disturbance of the spiritual order. It is, in essence, an empire of language. Control the words, and you control the world that those words describe. Orwell warned us of this. Hubbard mastered it. The machinery of belief inside Scientology is subtle, so subtle in fact that it disguises obedience as awakening. Members are told they are clearing their minds, freeing themselves from all prior conditioning. Yet in practice, they are only replacing one set of mental walls with another, polished and rebranded as enlightenment. What makes Scientology particularly modern is its precision in using language as hypnosis. Where old religions relied on fear of divine punishment, Scientology wields the authority of scientific jargon, words like audit, process, case study, e-meter reading. They sound empirical, clinical, but the effect is emotional, not intellectual. The faith works not because its followers understand it, but because they feel it makes sense. This is the genius of L. Ron Hubbard. He understood that people no longer wanted salvation from hell. They wanted certification of sanity. He gave them both, wrapped in administrative complexity so opaque that questioning it feels like failing a cosmic exam. And in that tangle of pseudoscience and self-help lies the perfect trap. The believer mistakes confusion for depth. The more incomprehensible the doctrine, the more profound it must be. The less they understand, the more they surrender. Hubbard once wrote that man is basically good, a comforting sentiment until one realizes that within Scientology, good simply means aligned with the church. To deviate, to question, to think independently is to risk being labeled a suppressive person, a kind of spiritual criminal. Once branded as such, you're not just exiled from the community. Your own family is ordered to sever ties. The church calls it disconnection, but the word softens the act, doesn't it? Like gently pulling apart puzzle pieces. In truth, it's psychological warfare disguised as virtue. The same organization that preaches mental freedom enforces emotional captivity through isolation and fear. To watch someone go through this is to witness a slow erasure of the self. The individual who once sought knowledge begins to fear their own curiosity. Every doubt feels like betrayal. Every instinct of self-preservation gets recast as rebellion against the greatest good. That phrase, the greatest good, is a favorite in Scientology. It's the moral currency of control. Whatever harms the church is evil. Whatever strengthens it, sacred. It transforms ethics into propaganda. But perhaps the most audacious move Hubbard made wasn't in crafting theology, it was in monetizing it. The Church of Scientology is not funded by charity, but by an economy of enlightenment. You don't tithe, you invest. You don't pray, you upgrade. Courses are sold as pathways to truth, each one slightly more expensive than the last, creating a hierarchy of spiritual classes. One begins as a pre-clear, burdened by invisible traumas, and ascends, through paid sessions, to the exalted status of operating thetan, a being who supposedly controls matter, energy, space, and time. It's the world's first pay-per-view salvation. And yet, amid the absurdity, there's something profoundly tragic. Because at its heart, Scientology preys on the same human ache that every religion does, the need to believe that pain means something, that we're not just random consciousnesses orbiting, meaninglessness. The church tells you your suffering is not your fault. You are not flawed. You are haunted by the ghosts of ancient extraterrestrial souls. And the cure, it can be purchased, scheduled, processed, and measured. It's comforting, in a way. To think that the chaos inside your mind isn't chaos at all, but interference from another realm. That if you just follow the right steps, if you pay the right fee, if you think the right thoughts, you can become clear, pure, unburdened, eternal. That's the seductive promise of Scientology, certainty. In a world allergic to ambiguity, it offers absolute truth, Every problem has an explanation, every flaw a fix, every question a price tag. The irony is that this obsession with clarity only deepens confusion. Those who reach the upper levels, after years of devotion and small fortunes spent, discover that the grand revelation is less cosmic truth and more comic tragedy. A galactic myth so fantastical it could have been lifted straight from a 1950s pulp novel, and still many remain. Because by that point, the cost of leaving is higher than the cost of staying. The sunk investment, money, relationships, identity, forms a psychological cage. They can't walk away without admitting that they've been deceived. And self-deception, once it becomes identity, defends itself like faith. If traditional religion chains the soul to the afterlife, Scientology chains it to the self. It creates a labyrinth inside the mind and sells the map, one course at a time. The paradox is poetic. In seeking total freedom, its followers become captives of their own pursuit of liberation. Scientology's greatest success is not in convincing the world it's true, but in convincing its members that doubt is disease, that the only cure for confusion is more Scientology. And so, the spiral continues. Question, pay, ascend, doubt, pay again. The mind becomes an economic engine, the soul a brand asset. Spirituality becomes customer retention. Behind the rhetoric of helping humanity, there lies an institution structured like a corporate state, with ranks, uniformed staff, secret archives, internal surveillance, and loyalty tests. The Sea Organization, its paramilitary arm, even requires members to sign billion-year contracts, because apparently the bureaucracy extends beyond time. The most chilling part is how normal it all sounds within their world. The more extreme the belief, the more rational the language becomes. Billion years isn't absurd, it's symbolic commitment. Disconnection isn't cruelty, it's ethical discipline. Psychiatry isn't a field of medicine, it's the greatest evil on earth. This inversion of meaning is how total systems survive. They don't destroy reason, they repurpose it. They teach people to argue for their own captivity with eloquence and passion. To an outsider, it looks like madness. To the believer, it feels like clarity. That's the real danger of such belief systems. Not that they're built on lies, but that they make lies feel like truth. They rewrite emotional logic until even suffering feels like evidence of progress. Hubbard's genius wasn't theological, it was psychological. He found a way to turn introspection into addiction. Every empire begins with a vision, and Hubbard's was no different. His ambition wasn't simply to found a religion, it was to re-engineer human consciousness. He wanted to replace introspection with a system, a set of mechanical steps that could allegedly scrub away the chaos of thought. And humanity, weary from wars and existential uncertainty, was ready to believe that salvation could be reduced to a method. It began with Dianetics, a self-help book marketed as the modern science of mental health. It wasn't science, of course. It was storytelling, disguised as psychology. But it gave people what they craved, the illusion of mastery over the mind. It promised that trauma could be erased like a stain, that fear could be deleted with discipline, and that you could be reborn as a flawless version of yourself. The promise was intoxicating. Imagine being told your pain isn't moral failure, but an easily fixable glitch. You don't need therapy, humility, or growth. Just more sessions. More hours on the e-meter, more clearing. Like updating software, you simply process your problems away. And therein lies the modernity of Scientology. It's the religion of self-optimization. It fits perfectly in an age obsessed with performance, productivity, and control. The divine becomes a personal upgrade. The sacred isn't prayer, it's efficiency. But in its obsession with self-perfection, it accidentally exposes the absurdity of that very pursuit. Because the mind cannot be debugged like code, and the human condition isn't a system error to be fixed, it's a mystery to be lived. Scientology denies that mystery. It replaces wonder with procedure. Its scriptures don't invite reflection, they instruct. Every answer is final, every contradiction resolved by more jargon. It's not about discovering truth, it's about maintaining the illusion that truth has already been discovered. One of Hubbard's core teachings is that we are all thetans, immortal beings who have forgotten our godlike nature. It sounds empowering, but look closely. And it's just another way of selling superiority. The same old religious trick: convince people they are special, then convince them you alone can remind them why. The brilliance lies in how it co-opts skepticism. Scientology tells its followers to question everything, except Scientology. It praises independence while enforcing absolute conformity. It claims to free humanity from mental slavery, all while rewriting the mind's vocabulary to exclude dissent. And its hostility towards psychiatry isn't philosophical, it's territorial. The church and the field of psychology compete for the same domain: the human psyche. One seeks understanding, the other seeks ownership. Hubbard knew that whoever controls the language of the mind controls the mind itself. So, psychiatry became the villain. Mental illness, a myth, depression, a product of spiritual contamination, medication, a conspiracy to keep people weak. Scientology doesn't heal these conditions. It reinterprets them as rebellion against its authority. In doing so, it weaponizes suffering. Even its concept of sin is uniquely modern. You don't confess to a god, you confess to a corporation. Your secrets are recorded, stored, archived. The church knows your weaknesses, your past, your desires. It keeps them as spiritual data. To leave the church after revealing your most intimate self is to risk your inner life being used against you. It's not divine forgiveness, it's data control. And yet, it all works because it satisfies the psychological hunger that modern society amplifies but never feeds. The hunger to feel exceptional. Scientology doesn't tell you to bow to a god. It tells you that you are one. The pitch isn't humility, it's empowerment. It flatters the ego while calling it enlightenment. That's why it appeals not just to the lost, but to the ambitious. Hollywood became its natural habitat. In a culture built on image, status, and transformation, what better religion than one that promises cosmic fame? It tells the actor, you're not playing a role, you're uncovering your true self, the divine star behind every mask. It's almost poetic, a religion that worships the self, built in the city that sells it. But beyond the celebrity sheen lies something darker, a system that enforces silence through fear. The church calls it fair game. Critics can be harassed, surveilled, discredited. Former members describe years of psychological pressure, public smearing, even family estrangement. In the name of protecting truth, the institution becomes an echo chamber of paranoia. There's a haunting irony in that. The religion that preaches ultimate freedom constructs one of the most rigid hierarchies imaginable. Every level demands loyalty, secrecy, obedience. The higher you climb, the less you can say. The promise of liberation becomes a trap of perpetual submission. And this is where Hubbard's genius collapses into pathology. His theology reflects the architecture of his own mind, a mixture of imagination and insecurity, brilliance and delusion. He wanted to conquer death, but ended up enslaving the living to his fantasy. He sought immortality through doctrine, not compassion. In many ways, Scientology is not a faith, but a mirror, a reflection of modern humanity's contradictions. We worship science yet misunderstand it. We seek individuality yet crave belonging. We reject dogma yet run towards certainty. The church simply combined all these impulses into a single product. Perhaps that's why it survives. Not because its ideas are strong, but because its illusions are beautifully engineered. It gives structure to chaos, purpose to anxiety, and vocabulary to confusion. For a price, it makes the unbearable tolerable, and people will always pay for that. In a way, Scientology is less a religion and more an experiment, one that proves how easily belief can be industrialized. It doesn't just sell salvation, it sells identity maintenance. Every course, every auditing session, every new level promises one thing, that you can keep becoming more yourself. But the tragedy is, the more you try to become clear, the less of yourself remains. Because self-knowledge born from fear isn't clarity, it's compliance. Hubbard once said, if you want to control someone, make sure they don't know they're being controlled. And that is the final paradox of Scientology. It calls itself the bridge to total freedom. Yet the bridge leads nowhere. It loops endlessly back to the toll booth. At the heart of every grand illusion lies a simple truth. People want to believe that their lives matter, that suffering has a purpose, that there's a secret order behind all the chaos. Scientology took that ancient longing and dressed it in the language of modernity, replacing robes with uniforms, scrolls with files, and prayer with processing. And in doing so, it revealed something uncomfortable about the human condition. The more advanced our world becomes, the more primitive our need for meaning remains. What makes Scientology both fascinating and disturbing is how perfectly it adapts the machinery of religion to the psychology of the consumer. It doesn't command faith, it markets it. The church doesn't call itself a place of worship, but an organization. Its temples are centers. Its priests are administrators. Its scriptures are copyrighted materials. It's the corporatization of transcendence. And yet, the tone is always one of grandeur. The walls of their orgs are adorned with quotes from Hubbard written in bold gold lettering, as though his every sentence were revelation. It's not humility they preach, it's the theater of authority. Every word carries the weight of unchallengeable truth. Every hallway lined with glossy images of progress and perfection. To walk inside one of these buildings is to step into a simulation of certainty. You can almost feel the psychological architecture, smooth lighting, minimalist design, smiling staff, everything choreographed to exude calm control. It's not spirituality, it's branding. This aesthetic perfection masks the deeper void. Because beneath all the rhetoric about freedom, the church is obsessed with surveillance. Members report on each other, keeping files on deviations in thought or behavior. To disagree isn't to question, it's to originate a problem, a sign that one's ethics need adjustment. Freedom, in Scientology, is never given. It's something you must constantly earn through obedience. You must pay for it, prove it, renew it. It's a subscription to liberation that never stops billing you. And what does it promise in return? Not peace, not love, not wisdom, but power. Power over self, over matter, over the universe. The allure is unmistakable. It flatters ambition while baptizing it. But the moment a belief system starts offering omnipotence, it stops being spiritual. It becomes imperial. That imperial impulse runs through every layer of the church's structure. The Sea Organization, its elite inner circle, isn't named after an ocean by accident. Hubbard ran his empire from ships in international waters, evading governments and taxes alike. He called his followers crew and himself Commodore. It was theology by way of totalitarianism, a spiritual navy defending invisible territories. Members of the Sea Org wear naval uniforms, address superiors by rank, and live under strict discipline. They sign billion-year contracts, pledging their service not just in this life, but for all future incarnations. Billion years. The absurdity of it is almost poetic, eternity as bureaucracy. It's easy to laugh at such grandiosity, but there's something deeply human in it too. We all overestimate our permanence, our significance. The billion-year contract is simply that delusion written down. It's humanity's longing for immortality, rendered in legalese. Still, what separates myth from madness is compassion. And that's precisely what Scientology lacks. The church speaks endlessly of helping mankind, yet its definition of help is obedience. It measures kindness by conformity, loyalty by silence, and redemption by revenue. One former member once described it beautifully. In Scientology, the only freedom you have is the freedom to agree. There is a peculiar genius in how it turns noble ideals against themselves. Honesty becomes self-surveillance. Self-improvement becomes self-erasure. Responsibility becomes submission. The very virtues that once defined individuality become the tools of its undoing. And that's where the religion reveals its most profound contradiction. It claims to free humanity from control while demanding total control over humanity. If you strip away the vocabulary and the sci-fi mythology, what remains is an age-old pattern, the promise of transcendence in exchange for surrender. It's the same logic that fueled the medieval church, the same psychology that built cults and empires alike. Only the costumes have changed. But Scientology, more than any other belief system, holds up a mirror to our era. It shows how easily rational people can be seduced not by superstition, but by systems. We no longer worship gods, we worship frameworks. The formulas that promise us mastery, over emotion, over pain, over uncertainty. Hubbard understood this perfectly. He didn't preach mystery. He preached methodology. He replaced the ineffable with the efficient. His scriptures are written like instruction manuals, each revelation reduced to a protocol. Step 1. Confront your reactive mind. Step 2. Clear your engrams. Step 3. Ascend. It's mechanical salvation. A machine pretending to have a soul. And perhaps that's why it resonates with certain minds. The logical, the analytical, the ones tired of the chaos of emotion. It tells them, you don't have to feel, you just have to process. Pain isn't a wound, it's an error code. Run the right program and the hurt will vanish. But emotion isn't malfunction, it's what makes us human. To remove it isn't to evolve, it's to hollow out the self until nothing remains but protocol. That's why the clear state, Scientology's promised ideal, is so chilling. A clear person, in Hubbard's vision, is one who no longer suffers from fear, doubt, or irrational thought. But to eliminate doubt is to eliminate curiosity. To erase fear is to erase empathy. The clear mind is not free, it's sterilized. The religion's dream of perfection becomes its nightmare. When a system aims to purify the soul, it inevitably begins by sterilizing the mind. It cannot tolerate ambiguity because ambiguity is freedom. Freedom of interpretation, freedom to question, freedom to not know. And so, Scientology replaces the unknown with certainty, and in doing so, kills wonder. It mistakes control for clarity, uniformity for truth. But what is truth without mystery? What is consciousness without contradiction? In trying to transcend humanity, Scientology becomes a parody of it. It seeks immortality, yet it cannot comprehend impermanence. It seeks perfection, yet cannot bear complexity. It seeks the infinite, but builds it out of concrete and contracts. And perhaps that's the final unspoken truth, that its greatest fantasy is not about aliens or galactic wars, but about escaping what it means to be human. Because to be human is to doubt, to hurt, to question, to change. Scientology calls these defects, but they are the essence of being alive. In the end, the story of Scientology is less about galactic overlords or immortal thetans, and more about human ambition and vulnerability. It is a monument to our desire for certainty, our hunger for control, and our longing to matter. Hubbard merely engineered a vessel for those impulses, a temple of structure disguised as a cathedral of freedom. The absurdity is transparent when examined from the outside. Alien empires, billion-year contracts, mind-reading devices that resemble oversized metal cans. Yet inside, it feels real, urgent, necessary. Reality bends in favor of narrative, because narrative provides comfort, and comfort, after all, is a powerful drug. Every auditor, every pre-clear, every operating thetan is participating in an elaborate psychological dance. Each ritual, each session, each payment reinforces the story. Even when it strains credulity, it persists because it answers a deeper, unspoken question. Who am I, and why does it matter? That's why intelligent, skeptical people fall prey to the church. Not because they lack reason, but because reason alone cannot satisfy the human soul. Scientology promises not belief, but control, the ultimate control over self and environment. And for a moment, that promise feels tangible, achievable, and worth every price. Yet, in granting that illusion, it exacts a heavier toll. Isolation from family, financial pressure, surveillance, and the erasure of self-doubt, all traded for a carefully curated certainty that may, ultimately, be nothing more than the shadow of its founder's imagination. The irony is brutal. A religion claiming to liberate the mind becomes its master. Its doctrines, meant to free, confine. Its rituals, meant to enlighten, enmesh. Its promises, meant to heal, entangle. And yet, it survives. Its adherents devoted, its narrative compelling, its machinery flawless. Because at its core, Scientology does what all religions do. It converts existential anxiety into action, meaning into obedience, and doubt into devotion. It monetizes hope, packages transcendence, and sells the ultimate illusion that the self can be perfected, controlled, and redeemed. It is a testament to human ingenuity and human folly, to our capacity for belief and our susceptibility to structure, to the fact that the mind, even when rational, will reach for anything that offers relief from the chaos of its own thoughts. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson hidden in Scientology's strange, spectacular architecture. Not about aliens, contracts, or secret doctrines, but about us, about our ceaseless search for significance, our willingness to trade freedom for certainty, and our enduring need to believe, even when the story is more elaborate than the universe itself. So, when you hear the words operating thetan or disconnection, consider what they reveal not just about a religion, but about what it means to be human, that the desire for certainty is eternal, that the appetite for narrative is unquenchable, and that even in the most elaborate fictions, we are always seeking the same thing: meaning, control, and a sense that our lives, somehow, matter. And now, I leave the thought with you. Where are you listening from? What time is it there? And what's your take on all this? Share your reflections not as a debate, but as a continuation of the conversation that stretches from the mind of L. Ron Hubbard to your own. Because in the end, the most profound dialogue is the one that makes us question ourselves,